Happy Valentine's Day, guys. Thanks for joining me for the second video this week that covers all the fights at UFC on ESPN 1 this weekend. I'm going to be breaking down another 3 fights in this video today, and hopefully this video will be much shorter than the video that I made yesterday. Yesterday's video was way too long, and the mistake I made was that I put 3 fights that required quite a lot of analysis in the same video together, which meant that it was a massive video. What I'm going to try and do is break up those kind of fights in the future so that there's maybe 1 complex fight and 2 easier fights to break down, so that hopefully the length of these videos should get a lot shorter. Now remember, if I get 20 likes on every video that I put out this week, I will be doing a bonus video this Saturday breaking down Bellator 216, Paul Daly versus Michael Venom Page. So if you do want me to do that video, please like this video, please like yesterday's video, and like all the other videos that I put out this week. And also, if you want me to keep producing these videos, show me some love by subscribing to the channel. But the first video that I'm going to jump into today is Benito Lopez against Manny Bermudez. So with these two boys, someone's O has got to go. They're both undefeated. Benito Lopez is 9-0 and Manny Bermudez is 3-0. But what I would say about Bermudez is that his record is a little padded, to be honest with you. The majority of his wins throughout his career, he has absolutely tons of wins in the first round, as you can see. But most of his first round wins came in this promotion called Cage Titans. And I've looked through quite a lot of his past fights from back in Cage Titans, and to be honest with you, he wasn't facing the best level of opponent. Now, you know, a win-loss record never tells the whole story. Ultimately, you can only ever beat what is put in front of you. Even though some of the guys he's got wins over have got pretty good records, you know, Tony Gravely 8-3, Saul Almeida 18-7, Rodrigo Almeida 13-3. From looking at the footage of the guys he's fought, it's not great. So I'm going to show you that now. Here's one of his fights from back. When did he fight Seth Baszler? So this would have been back in the beginning of last year, so almost exactly 12 months ago, give or take a couple of weeks. So if we look at this fight against Seth Baszler, Manny Bermudez, very high level ground game, but as the fight starts, you know, we see very early on what Manny Bermudez's intentions are for this fight. He's going to try and get the fight to the ground very quickly. So I believe Baszler also took this fight on just a couple of days' notice. There we see Bermudez shooting on a half-hearted single leg attempt, didn't get it, but this time manages to tie Baszler up, gets 2 underhooks in play very, very quickly, and drives Baszler into the cage. And from there, he's able to turn that into a very nice trip takedown after he used those underhooks to get full control of Baszler's body. And before long, we see Manny Bermudez show off his excellent ground game, goes straight to half guard, and before long, you're going to see him mount Baszler very quickly. There he goes, moves over into mount, and from there he uses the same setup that he used to submit Davy Grant in his last fight in the UFC. Went straight to the mounted triangle and gets the tap out very, very quickly. There we go, it is all over. So that was Manny Bermudez a year ago against Seth Baszler in Cage Titans. This is another one of his fights. This is against Bendy Casimir from back in August 2017. So if we go back to this, for Casimir, you'll see that there is a bit of a feeling out process early on. You know, Bermudez takes a little longer to try and tie up with Casimir or shoot in on him this time. As you can see, there's a bit of a feeling out process. You know, not many strikes are exchanged. We don't really learn a lot about Bermudez's stand-up in this fight because, you know, Casimir is so afraid of being taken down that he doesn't really let his hands go. And Bermudez has only got one thing in his mind. He obviously wants to get this fight to the ground, so he's really not letting his hands go either. But pretty soon, this is a game of patience. Who breaks first? And as you can see, Casimir broke first, threw a lazy kick, or a naked kick, sorry, got caught off balance, taken down, and exactly the same setup that Bermudez used to submit Baszler and Davy Grant in his last fight in the UFC. He also uses to put Bendy Casimir to sleep very, very quickly. Very, very impressive. Another fight here, Rodrigo Almeida, Manny Bermudez. This is from back in 2016. So, you know, Bermudez is only 24 years old. So back in 2016, probably would have been about 22. You'd expect him to have improved a hell of a lot since then. You know, fighters tend to improve a lot in the early stages of their career when they're like a sponge and they're using all these new techniques. But in this fight, we can see that you know, Manny coming out a little bit more aggressively here than he did against Casimir. Uses some strikes to tie Almeida up. This time he couldn't get double underhooks this time, possibly because Almeida is quite a bit shorter than him. It was difficult to get those underhooks in place, so he went to an overhook instead. But the main thing here is Almeida is choosing to engage in the clinch with him. Here you'll see Manny at this point has absolutely nothing. This was Almeida's opportunity to get out of trouble and disengage, but obviously Almeida's a wrestler, so he decides to shoot in on Manny instead. Manny starts to threaten a guillotine here, but cannot get his right arm underneath Almeida's left arm to complete the guillotine, to connect his hands together, so gives up on it. Goes for it a second time though, and here we can see he has much more success. This is much deeper this time, and before long Almeida is forced to tap. So again, quick submission win for Manny Bermudez. Very impressive, showing off his grappling skills. Then we have got a fight against a guy called Jeff Anderson. This took place way back in June 2016. And in this fight, there is again a bit of a feeling out process at the beginning. But again, similar to the fight against Casimir, we don't really learn that much about Manny Bermudez's striking, because he doesn't really let his hands go. And on this occasion, it was actually Jeff Anderson that chose to tie Bermudez up. He went to the clinch. Manny Bermudez more than happy to oblige. And now we see Bermudez with the left underhook on the right side. Does have his hands connected around Anderson's body, but doesn't really have too much here, because if we just go back a couple seconds, notice how we can't get the second underhook in play. Anderson's done a really good job of fighting for that and preventing Manny from getting that in place. So Anderson making Bermudez work a little harder to get control of his body to some of his other opponents we've seen, but before long, exactly the same deal. As soon as Manny gets his arms around your neck, here he's got his hands connected on a guillotine attempt. Doesn't even have full control of Anderson's body here. If you notice here, sorry, just to go back a second. If you notice here, Bermudez doesn't even have Anderson in guard, and he still manages to get a quick tap off the guillotine. So very impressive from Manny Bermudez. He's obviously very high level on the ground. He was able to submit Albert Morales with a triangle choke in his UFC debut, and also he got a quick first round submission against Davy Grant in his last fight, and that submission was pretty much the exact same as what we saw him use against Baszler and Casimir with a mounted triangle. The only difference about the Davy Grant fight was that Manny Bermudez actually knocked Grant down with a strike and then immediately jumped into Grant's guard. Exactly the same process, worked into mounted triangle, game over, good win. But with Bermudez being 13-0 and having so many fights in this Cage Titans promotion, you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 fights in this Cage Titans promotion. His record does look a little bit padded, if I'm honest with you. The only occasions where he's faced the step up in competition is obviously his 2 fights in the UFC, which he has managed to pick up 2 impressive submission wins in, and also back when he fought in CES 39 back in November 2016 against Saul Almeida, who's obviously had a couple fights in World Series of Fighting, decent record at 18-7, but unfortunately I couldn't find this fight online, so he only won that fight by split decision. The only information I could really find on that fight was this article from MMA Junkie back in November 2016, which does say here, in the co-headliner, featherweight Manny Bermudez picked up a questionable split decision win over Saul Almeida. So that suggests that his performance might not have been that impressive, but I can't give you much detail over that because I can't find the fight online. So what does that mean for this matchup? Obviously, Manny Bermudez is very high level on the ground, but his record is also a little bit padded. And is this just a case of a really high level grappler blowing through the regional circuit and picking up loads of wins against low level guys, something that we see very often? You know, it's a definite possibility. So if we look at Benito Lopez, one thing I would say is that he definitely knows how to defend himself on the ground. If we go to his Instagram profile, you know, he trains at Alpha Male with some very high level grapplers. So you'd expect Benito Lopez to be training with grapplers, very good grapplers every single day of the week, while Manny Bermudez, you know, trains at a small independent gym. His training partners probably aren't the best to help him develop, whereas Benito Lopez, you know, Lopez also very young. He's only 24 years old, training at a gym like Team Alpha Male. We expect him to be making significant improvements from fight to fight, and he already looks great. You know, he's got decent takedown defense. In fact, he's got very good takedown defense, which you'd expect, you know, training at a predominantly grappling-based gym with so many strong wrestlers like Alpha Male. And he's also got good submission defense. And what I would say about Manny Bermudez is, even though he is undoubtedly very high level on the ground, Albert Morales isn't the best on the ground. And when I went back and watched this fight, similar to what we saw in yesterday's video with Crone Gracie, before Bermudez was able to submit Morales, Morales did manage to escape Manny's guard and was able to defend quite well. So it's possible that Bermudez could look super slick, super deadly on the ground against these lower level guys, but as he starts to face a step up in competition, we may see him struggle a little more. And like I say, based on the past fights I've seen from Benito Lopez, based on the fact that he trains at Team Alpha Male, you know, with guys like Danny Castillo, Andre Philly, Uriah Faber. How the hell could I forget Uriah Faber, the most famous guy in this picture? But yeah, that's the point I'm trying to make. Lopez can defend himself on the ground. So the problem I have with this fight is, even though Benito Lopez has got really good takedown defense, he does throw a lot of naked kicks and knees when he's off balance, which does open up takedown opportunities for his opponents. Now, I haven't seen Manny Bermudez manage to catch any knees or kicks and turn them into takedowns in his past fights, but that's mainly because I haven't seen many of his past opponents throw kicks or knees in his past fights. So it doesn't mean that he hasn't got that in his locker. Now, when we take a look at the odds for this fight, Benito Lopez is currently, call it an average of 2.70, which would give him an implied probability of 37%. And then if we look at the odds on Manny Bermudez, he's currently floating around 1.50, call it an average of 1.50, which is an implied probability rounded up to 67%. So I do think, based on what I've seen, that that implied probability of 67% is a little bit aggressive, to be honest with you. Benito Lopez really isn't that bad, to be honest with you. And if he can keep this fight standing, I do think it's going to be very close. And he does have the skills to keep the fight standing. So to cap Bermudez at 67% is quite aggressive. There's definitely no value there. I would not bet Manny Bermudez at these odds because, you know, realistically, to get any additional value on a Manny Bermudez bet, you'd have to cap him at 70%. And, you know, considering the fact that Benito Lopez is very good everywhere, considering the fact he's got good takedown defense, and considering the fact that Manny Bermudez is largely unproven, you know, he hasn't gone the distance for a very long time. The one time he did go the distance against Saul Almeida in CES, it was a split decision win. With this being a step up in competition, I do think there's no value there. So is there value taking a chance on Benito Lopez as an underdog? So if we pop his odds back in, 2.70, probability of 37%. Now, the issue I have with betting Lopez in this fight is, even though he's got the skills to keep the fight standing, like I say, he does throw a lot of flashy, high-risk, low-reward knees and kicks when he's off balance, which open up easy takedown opportunities for his opponents. It even opens up the possibility that he'll slip and end up on the ground completely through his own doing, and then obviously Bermudez could rush into top position. What I would say about Lopez is, even though I do think he has the skills to make this fight competitive if he shows up with his absolute A game, I can't call anything out and say I think Benito Lopez is going to win this fight because I can't do that, because from what I've seen, Lopez is possibly a slightly better striker than Manny Bermudez, but he doesn't really carry that much power in his hands, and the unorthodox flashy kicks and knees that he throws leaves him open to being caught in bad positions on the ground. And there's no doubt at all that even though Benito Lopez can definitely do a good job of defending himself on the ground, there's no doubt that Manny Bermudez is a much higher level from a technical point of view. What I would also say is, if you go back and watch Benito Lopez's fight against Steven Peterson on Dana White's Contender Series, you'll see in round 2, Peterson was able to get him down, and to be honest with you, Benito Lopez looked quite helpless off his back, didn't really know how to improve his position or get back up, and Peterson had quite a long period of top control. So that's also a little bit of a risk, where even though Lopez is very good at defending himself on the ground, if he ends up on the ground, it's unlikely that if Bermudez is on top, we're going to see Lopez be able to work his way back to his feet. So this fight is a pass from me, guys. I wouldn't be surprised if Lopez finds a way to make this a close fight and win a close decision if he shows up with his absolute A game, and if he's improved his fight IQ and also his ability to improve his position when he's on his back. And you know, there's a good chance that he has. At the end of the day, he's only 24 years old, hasn't fought in over a year now. There's a good chance that Benito Lopez is going to come into this fight and look significantly better than we've seen from him in the past. But at the moment, with an implied probability of 37%, you know, hand on heart, I can't give him, you know, a 45% chance of winning this fight or a 50% chance of winning this fight, which would give us enough value to take a gamble on him, simply because I don't see him having a big advantage when it comes to striking, and Bermudez is miles better on the ground. So that's that fight done. We are totally ticked the box on that one. And again, I don't want to take up too much of your time today because it is Valentine's Day, and if you're anything like me, you leave these things at the last minute, so you've got to nip out to the shops and buy some wine, some chocolate, probably some expensive electronics and all that kind of shit. And when I say expensive electronics, I don't mean anything dirty. I mean like a fucking new phone or an iPad or something like that. Alright, so let's move on to the next fight. Speaking of Valentine's Day, we're going to be talking about two lovely ladies now. Cynthia Calvillo against Cortney Casey. And she seems to have dropped the double-barreled name. Her name when she first came to the UFC was Cortney Casey Sanchez. But she seems to just be rolling with Cortney Casey now. So I'll stick with that. If that's wrong, let me know. Don't want to disrespect anyone by using the wrong name, but we'll call her Cortney Casey for the time being. And I don't want to spend long on this fight, guys, because this is a very, very simple one to break down, to be honest with you. Basically, Cortney Casey has a huge advantage standing. I don't really give Calvillo much of a chance of having any success standing. And then Calvillo has a gigantic advantage on the ground. If this fight goes to the ground, Cortney Casey is in big, big, big trouble. The problem is Calvillo's not the best offensive wrestler. She just struggles to take people down with traditional wrestling techniques. She's more of an opportunistic grappler, which relies on, you know, catching kicks and turning them into takedowns, or opportunistic trips, or she relies on her opponent making a mistake and being caught off balance and an easy takedown basically coming to her. She doesn't really attempt to take her opponents down that much, which is something that concerns me about her in this fight. You know, she'll only shoot on average maybe one takedown per round, and if her opponent stuffs it, she'll give up on it to the next round. That's possibly a pacing issue. She's possibly been in a situation in the past where she may have gassed out, and for that reason she doesn't want to commit a lot of energy to getting her opponents to the ground for fear of gassing out. So instead she chooses to just manage her cardio by being really economical with her takedowns. Maybe that's why we don't see Calvillo initiate takedowns that much, but in terms of offensive wrestling, you know, she's not great at taking her opponents down. But that might not matter in this fight, because not only does Cortney Casey have terrible takedown defense, but she also makes a lot of mistakes. I've seen her pull guard in the past. I've seen her go for high risk, low reward throws, which have given up her back to her opponent. And as we've seen in the past, you know, with Calvillo's fights against Amanda Cooper, and also Pearl Gonzalez, and even Poliana Botelho in her last fight. She is absolutely nasty with a rear naked choke. She can take her opponents back faster than almost any other female fighter in the world, to be honest with you. She is a nightmare on the ground. So this is one of those fights where I don't think that Calvillo necessarily has the skills to take Casey down. Having said that, Casey's takedown defense is so bad, and she often makes really poor decisions like pulling guard or being caught off balance or giving up really weak, easy takedowns, that I could definitely see Calvillo being able to find a way to get this fight to the ground. Like I say, she's an opportunistic grappler. We saw that in her last fight against Poliana Botelho. Botelho's got solid takedown defense, a strong base, trains at Nova União. I believe she trains at Nova União. Let me just fact check that so that I don't come up with any nonsense. Yes, Paulo Botelho does train at Nova União, so all the fighters that train at Nova União. Let's be real, I've never seen a fighter that trains at Nova União have bad takedown defense, but Calvillo's an opportunistic grappler. She managed to get Botelho down twice in that fight through catching kicks, turn them into takedowns. So Casey has the skills to win if she can keep this fight standing, but her questionable decisions in the past around pulling guard and throwing lazy kicks and just generally giving up weak takedowns makes me think that Calvillo should win this. And if we look at the odds, the reason why I don't want to spend too long on it is the odds on Calvillo roughly around 1.31, giving her an implied probability of 76%. And Cortney Casey call it an average of 3.60 with an implied probability of 28% rounded up. So the way I look at this fight is, can Casey win? Yeah, she can win. She does have a big advantage when it comes to striking. And if she came in with a really smart game plan and shut down Calvillo's quite weak offensive wrestling, she could definitely keep this fight standing and win. But from her past performances, something tells me that Calvillo is going to be able to get her down at some point in this fight. And when she does, the chances are the skill gap is so big that Calvillo is going to be able to submit her. And that's not to say Casey's ground game isn't good, because it is. Casey is very technical on the ground. It's just that there are levels, and Calvillo is a completely different level. And Casey does make the mistake in her fights of giving up her back a lot. And we know, like I said earlier, Calvillo is an absolute ninja at taking her opponents back and getting in that rear naked choke. So from a betting perspective, in order to bet someone at these odds, with an implied probability of 76%, they basically have to have no way of losing for there to be value there, because to get value there, you'd have to cap Calvillo at having an 80% chance or better of winning, and that's a stretch. To be honest with you, that is a stretch when you factor in bad judging, flash knockdowns, flash KOs, injuries, all that kind of stuff, disqualifications. So Calvillo should win, but in my opinion, not worth putting in a parlay or an accumulator or any kind of bet, really. Best to pass on that one. Sorry to be boring, but you can't really force a bet where there isn't one. And also, Casey, yes, she can win, but why would you roll the dice and gamble on a fighter who is liable to give up weak takedowns and who will probably get dominated as soon as the fight goes to the ground? So now we move on to the next one, which is going to be Vicente Luque against Bryan Barberena. Now, when I first start researching an event, I kind of scan through all the fights, and I will try and prioritize which fights I think might be the best for betting, and then the names that jump out at me of the fighters who I think might be good bets are the fights that I focus on researching first. And out of every single fighter on this card, Vicente Luque was the name that jumped out at me the highest. Unfortunately, he's a big favourite. He was a big favourite, and he has been a big favourite all week. We can see here his odds have actually fallen off a cliff in the last 24 hours. They have declined from 1.28 down to 1.25. They look to be getting worse, but I mean, it's no great loss really, because he was only ever at 1.28, 1.29 is the best you could have got anyway. But yes, Luque was the first name that jumped out to me because, to be honest with you, I thought it would be an easy money bet. Remember, in yesterday's video, I said there's two types of bets that I like. I like a bet where there's a good amount of risk, but we know that the reward is worth the risk. The payoff is worth the risk. So it's worth taking a gamble. Even if you don't think the fighter necessarily has the best chance of winning, the risk is worth the reward. Or the other type of bet, my personal favourite type of bet, like our two winning bets last week, where we bet on Lando Venata to beat Marcos Rosa, and also Montana De La Rosa to beat Nadia Kassem. Those are the bets I love, the low-hanging fruit, the easy winners, where you have one fighter with massive, significant advantages everywhere over their opponent. And to be honest with you, I kind of felt like Luque might have ticked that box. And to some extent, to be honest with you, he does. He really does. He is significantly better than Barberena everywhere. There's absolutely no denying it. He is a significantly better striker, carries knockout power in every shot, and a significantly more technical grappler. You know, one of the things that's plagued Barberena since he came into the UFC has been his takedown defense and ground game. You know, we saw Leon Edwards expose that in one of his recent fights. I say recent, it was recent in terms of he's only had one fight since then, but it was back in September 2017. Edwards was able to take him down, take his back, put him in some really bad positions. Colby Covington obviously put on a grappling clinic. Wally Alves had some success early on with his grappling, but then obviously gassed out bad and Barberena took over. But what I would say is Barberena's takedown defense is so bad that if any point in this fight Luque gets into trouble, Luque does have the wrestling to take him down easily and dominate him on the ground. Luque also has the skills to dominate the striking exchanges. He's much more technical, hits much harder. Now, in the past, Barberena has struggled with being able to finish his opponents. To be honest, he hasn't really carried that much knockout power, hasn't really been dangerous at all on the ground. And while he still isn't dangerous on the ground, there are signs that he may be developing knockout power. And that may not be that he's getting stronger and developing more power, but it may be that his striking technique is improving. So maybe he's laying more traps for his opponent. That means he can land shots they don't see coming, or maybe he's just improving his technique, which is meaning he's landing with more impact. And the signs that he is developing knockout power, because in his last three fights he's got two first round wins by KO. Obviously, you may say Ellenberger's chin's completely shot. He's really fragile at this stage in his career. Absolutely, I agree with you. But at the end of the day, Barberena still knocked him out. A win is a win, and he can only beat what's in front of him. Proctor is a little bit more durable, but again, Proctor's had a few KO losses in the past. So, yeah, I get it. You know, a knockout win over Proctor is not super impressive, but it's still a sign that if we look back at his career, where he has got a lot of decision wins, at this point, he's possibly turning a corner. And I know, guys, Chad Priest, Volley Alves, Colby Covington, they're at a higher level than the likes of Jake Ellenberger and Proctor. But in these fights, he didn't really, whenever he landed on these higher level guys, there were no signs that he was really hurting them. Whereas now when he's landing, he's showing signs that he's really hurting his opponents. But to cap off the point I'm making, even though we did lose this fight against Leon Edwards, we know Leon Edwards is very tough and he has a very good chin. If we look back at Leon Edwards, he's fought a lot of heavy hitters, and he has fought guys that are extremely deadly. If we look back at his record, he's fought Donald Cerrone, gone the distance with Cerrone. Obviously, Cerrone's super dangerous. Peter Sabota's no picnic either. Obviously, Sabota's got a couple of knockout wins on his record. Vicente Luque, he went the distance with. We know Luque is nasty, vicious KO power in every shot. Tumanov is an absolute killer. He's got knockout power in every shot. So Edwards has got a decent chin. He's tough and it's difficult to hurt him. And yet in the second round, Barberena was able to knock him down. And I can't recall anyone being able to knock Leon Edwards down in the past. So the fact that Barberena was able to knock Edwards down is perhaps a sign that he's developing knockout power, improving his striking. Now, one concern I do have about Barberena is that obviously he is your typical MMA lab type fighter. I haven't got this up, so I do apologise. I am going to have to bring his Instagram page up here. But one thing I will say is a little bit of a concern about Barberena is he's obviously your typical MMA lab type fighter. Very tough, decently well-rounded, kind of guy you have to practically kill in order to win, and loves to walk his opponents down, apply loads of pressure, and break their will. Literally, like so many MMA lab guys use that strategy to win fights. You know, you think of Draca Closer is a perfect example. The kind of guy with Barberena who's great at nothing but reasonably good at everything. He's tricky. He's always going to be able to make fights competitive. But one thing that concerns me is I'm not sure if he's training at MMA lab anymore. If you look back through his Instagram profile, these guys are not at MMA lab, and he says that it's another great week of camp at Jimmo Tribe. So by the looks of it, he has switched gyms from MMA lab to another small independent gym that I haven't heard of. Another picture here from January, Jimmo Tribe. You know, none of these guys train at MMA lab. Don't recognize any of them. So it's possible that Barberena might have switched camps, which I'm not sure is the smartest decision for a fighter like Barberena, who still has a lot of improving to do if he wants to compete with the top 15 guys in the UFC. So from a betting perspective, this is an easy one to wrap up. Vicente Luque is around about 1.25. So we pop that in the implied probability calculator. It gives him an implied probability, massive implied probability of 80%. And Barberena, call it an average odds of, let's just call it 4.0. For a 25% implied probability. Now, obviously, I have no interest in betting Barberena here because Luque is significantly better than him everywhere. I expect Luque to dominate this fight from the very first second to the last because I don't believe Barberena can apply the kind of pressure that is going to be able to break Luque's will, like we've seen Barberena do to so many other guys in the past, because Luque's so tough. He has good cardio, he hits very hard, so it's going to be difficult for Barberena to keep coming forward without taking a lot of damage. And the one significant factor in this that makes me feel that Barberena is totally unbettable is the fact that he's got very bad takedown defense. So at any point, if Luque gets into trouble, he should be able to shoot a takedown, take Barberena down, work his ground game, and run the clock down and win an easy decision that way. So Barberena is unbettable for me, even with an implied probability of 25%. But if we pop Luque back in, implied probability of 80%. Now, I'm not opposed to betting on a fighter at any odds. I'm not one of these guys that have got stupid rules on, you know, you shouldn't bet a guy at such and such odds because something crazy might happen. I'm not into that because if I see a fighter like Luque that's significantly better than his opponent everywhere, the way I look at this is I can get a 25% return on my money for basically very minimal risk, which is a bloody good return on investment, to be honest with you. But in order to place a bet like that, I have to feel totally confident that there's pretty much no way that a fighter can lose. I would only bet a fighter with an implied probability of 80% if they basically cannot lose, if they literally have to get struck by lightning in the octagon in order to lose. And I don't feel that way about Luque because, like I say, he is significantly better than Barberena everywhere, but with Barberena's two knockout wins in his last 3 fights, and the fact that he knocked Leon Edwards down at the beginning of round 2 is just a little bit more risk there than I'd like to bet on someone as such a big favourite. And also, Luque does have a habit of getting sucked into wild exchanges. He's got an amazing chin, but he also relies on his chin and puts himself in harm's way. So that's it for today's video, guys. I'll be back tomorrow with another 3 fights for you. If you liked the video, please hit the like button. And if I get 20 likes on every video this week, I will do a bonus video breaking down Bellator 216 on Saturday. Please also subscribe if you want me to keep doing these videos to help the channel grow. And yeah, that's it. Nice one, guys. I'm going to nip out now and get some stuff for the missus because it's Valentine's Day. I will see you guys tomorrow.
Too many thoughts on my mind, I can't sleep at night, so I just keep writing. I don't need no help, I don't need opinions, so don't waste my time then. I just been living online, my city don't show me no love and that's fine. Fuck local radio stations, I got more plays than all of these rappers combined. I'm going again, I've been going in, I'm fed up with so many things. I gotta just let it all out, I'm talking about the shit they've been talking.